Welcome to the Heat of Command podcast, Mastering the Art of Fire Service Leadership,
where we, your hosts, aim to teach you how to use introspection and self-reflection to be your most authentic, genuine self, leader, and human being.
And now, here are your hosts. This is Kyle Matousek
and Kerry Henderson. Thanks for joining. Welcome back to another season of the Heat of Command podcast with Kyle and Kerry. We have missed you guys. I hope you have missed us. We've been on vacation. Some of us have been traveling the country and some of us haven't. And some of us are bitter about that. And some of us aren't, if you can tell who. And while we've been gone, some nice R&R. Kyle and I have been chit-chatting, putting in some conference submissions. And we've heard back from a couple that we're excited to report that we will be in 2025, again, at the Virginia Fire Rescue Conference and also back at TEACS, waiting to hear back on a couple more, but that's our news to report out to you guys. And when we get started in this new season, we're going to do a different format. I don't even know if we'll really call these seasons anymore. We kind of had themes for each season where we somewhat stayed on topic each episode. This season, I think we're going to try something different where it's kind of hodgepodge. The Jeopardy topic will be what it will be for the day, and we'll roll with it. And the goal this season and moving forward is to have more guest interviewees so we can hear from all of you guys out there and hear from a lot of well-respected folks out in the fire service industry. And we want to hear their thoughts on the topics that we love to talk about and that are near and dear to Kyle and I's heart. So to get started, for those of you that might be tuning in for the first time, Kyle and I like to talk a lot about the soft skills of leadership, which we say are actually the hard skills. They're the hard things to teach. And if you aren't kind of naturally inclined in those, it's hard to master. And it's a lot of personal and self-development, self-work that goes into it. And so we travel around and write about and talk about and interview people that are good at the soft skills. And so like the things like being genuine and being authentic and being compassionate, being empathetic, and getting to know your folks all starts with getting to know yourself. So today we do have a guest on our podcast. We're super excited. We have Chief Michael Carter from Virginia Beach Fire Department. He is their battalion chief of training. And I've sat in on in a lot of meetings with Chief Carter, and he has those skills. I've seen him talk to just about anybody about just about anything and really has a way with people. So we wanted to pick his brain about some of his journey in leadership, leadership training of the look like, and some of the things that Virginia Beach is doing with their folks, with their officers, with their newbies coming in, and what that looks like in the future for them. So, Chief Carter, if you want to give a little intro about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, I'm really excited to be on this podcast with you guys, and I think you're doing some really cool stuff. And excited to see you again at the Virginia Fire Rescue Conference, and that's just something that keeps growing and growing. And it was kind of neat to see you guys do a live podcast there, and hopefully you'll be able to do something like that again. So, yeah, so I've been in the fire service for about 23 years, and I took a very, very non-traditional path to leadership. And I've always been eager to learn, eager to continue that journey, and I've always liked leadership. And so I started actually in Suffolk Fire Department in 2000, and then kind of decided I always wanted to be a Virginia Beach Fire Department. My father was in Virginia Beach Fire Department, and so I always wanted to do that. And so I got hired at Virginia Beach in 2001. And I stayed there till about 2007, where I had an opportunity to go to Currituck County and become the chief of fire and EMS in Currituck County, North Carolina. So I was there 3 years as the department chief and started at 29 years old, which a lot of lessons learned there, right? And then grew that department probably from, I would say, about 55 people to probably a little over or around 100 full-time folks in that short period of time, because it was such a growing community, with the budget expanding, that kind of stuff. And then had an opportunity to go to Northern Virginia and Stafford County and was the assistant chief of operations for Stafford County for about 2 years. And then I missed home, and I missed, my family life was different. Things were going on. I have 3 kids, and that's very important to me. And so I definitely took a non-traditional path. I had some opportunities to go somewhere else, but I came home. And so I came back as a rookie firefighter in Virginia Beach, and then worked my way back up. And that was back in 2012, 2013. I was rehired at Virginia Beach, and then worked my way back up in a traditional manner. And so I've been a battalion chief now for about 3 years. I was afforded the opportunity of the voluntold opportunity to go into training. I think you know a little bit about that, Kerry, right? but it's a coveted position, I think, in any department because you have such influence. And so I've been there now about 15 months and been able to work with some of the great folks there in a very different time. And I think that we're all experiencing that throughout the fire service, where we're seeing a lot of folks come in and out, and the fire service has changed a little bit about that. So this is my 6th academy in just that 15 months. Well, it will be, I guess, after 2 years, this will be my 6th academy. And we were talking about it the other day. It'll be about 120 members that we'll have trained in that short period of time of new firefighters. And so our department's will be a little over around 600 members strong as of March. So we're definitely a metro large department, 22 stations, 9 ladders, 2 rescue companies, 22 engines. And then we have 5 battalions that are on shift with a shift commander every day and a safety officer. So pretty big department, pretty exciting department. I love being a part of it. And I love what we're doing actually in the region too, Kerry. So that's a little bit about me. I do have a passion for leadership. I have a passion for being around people. I think that people are our product. And so that's what we deliver. That's our service delivery model, is the people. And so if you're having a bad day, then you're going to deliver a bad product. If you're having a good day, then hopefully you're delivering a great product to the people.
Wow, I did not know all that about you jumping around in your background there. I knew you had gone somewhere and come back. I think about the being in Currituck, but I didn't know all that. So that is definitely a tough road in leadership, being that young, I'm guessing. So I'm glad you shared that. And I think we can talk about that a little bit more too in a minute. But first, and I forgot to mention it earlier, and I jump around, but thank you. We want to thank you for your efforts with us last year at the Fire Rescue Conference, getting us front and center there for the podcast. And we recorded right in the middle of the showroom floor and aired an episode. So we thank you for your assistance with that, because that was a very highly listened to episode. And for selfish reasons, we wanted to invite you on here because you're like a celebrity around here in the Hampton Roads region.
I don't know about that.
Get a bunch of listeners.
We're gonna make him a celebrity here in Illinois now.
Yeah. You're gonna make me something. I'm gonna be buying ice cream at some fire stations. That sounds like so.
That's right. That's 100% correct.
No, I think that was a good episode, and I think that from our own selfish reasons that we want to do more of those kind of things. So having people in the fire service community that want to do good things, like I think both of you are, that just gives you better exposure, gives the Fire Rescue Conference better exposure. I've kind of taken a step back from the committee. I'm on the board of directors now for Virginia Fire Rescue, or for Virginia Fire Chiefs Association. So, but I still obviously have some contacts and influences there. So I think that they'll be wide open to having that as an opportunity to do that. And I'm hoping that we get a couple of more folks that are sharing that information out there, because I think it's good for the fire services as a whole.
Yeah. And I listened to you. It was so, Kyle, if you're not familiar, Mike and I both sit on the Hampton Roads Training Officers Group, and it's training officers from all over Hampton Roads, and we meet once a month. And the direction that group has taken has been really, really incredible the last year or so, and maybe even longer since I transitioned back into training. But you mentioned that people are, our product. And I feel like Virginia Beach and James City and some of the departments that are in HTOG have a similar philosophy that you've got to put it into your people and treat your people right. And then it just goes from there. Then you don't have to go down the discipline road as often. You don't have to, it takes care of so many other things if you handle that the right way. And Kyle has a little bit different perspective in Illinois. And so we talk about this a lot, but when we travel around, I just don't feel like nationally everybody's hitting the mark on that. So it's really cool to see in our area how many departments really are figuring that out. So,
yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think in general, when we talk about the things that we talk about, and just have to try to have this progressive mindset, I think it's the most well received just from my experience in Virginia, and it's they're already having these conversations. And I think, it's just important to start the conversations and then where it goes. But then when you start putting it into action, you start seeing what comes out of that and the product that you're producing and what you're seeing and staying up to speed with what's coming into the fire service and stuff. I mean, it's work, right? And we have to adapt and overcome some things and work on things and constantly, evaluate what's working and not. And like I said, just from what I've seen, my experience where I'm at in Illinois, Virginia is by far leaps and bounds ahead from what I've experienced.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we are lucky in Virginia. I've been around, obviously, to a couple other places, specifically North Carolina in Virginia, but we've all gone to conferences and gone into and have our contacts in other parts of the country. And I do think, I heard this on another episode or podcast somewhere that, if you don't think that your fire department's the best fire department or the agencies you're working around, then, there's probably something going on, right? There's probably something wrong as far as, so you want to obviously be a part of that. Not all of us have problems. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
But I also like to say, and I think I stole this from an old deputy chief from Spotsylvania, but he would say that you take the patch off, same problem, different patch, right? And so I think it may be just timing. You may have like a lot of us have staffing problems right now, but ironically, James City doesn't have as big a staffing problem as others. I can say that after this recruit class that we have, I think our staffing problem is going to get better. So I think we're going to have other transitions of problems where people are going to have those issues for years to come. So I think I think again, people are a big piece of that. And then just sometimes, it's having those discussions and opening that up. And I think HTOG is a great example of some of the great things that are happening. We have a lot of new fresh faces in there, meaning I know you've been on there before too, Kerry, but I mean, I think we have people who are open to ideas and pushing some stuff. And I think that's made some differences and some changes. And instead of just being report outs of, hey, this is what we're doing in my department, it's really trying to move the region forward. And that's been exciting to be a part of. So I think that's what, again, you talk about people, your product, that makes the difference, right? So if you go in there and you say, hey, we can go to this meeting and we can just tell you what I'm doing in these different departments, that's great. Or we can say, hey, we're doing this in different departments. What can we do to make it better for training? And whether that's connecting our LMS systems together or, holding training, joint training, regional training, and the things that you guys are doing on the peninsula are fantastic in terms of the auto aid and how you're operating and your command stuff. It's been phenomenal. So I think there's some things that you're doing a lot better than perhaps our region's doing or our South Side area is doing. And I think there's some stuff that we can share with you that, that can go that way. So it's interesting, the Illinois perspective. I'm not as familiar with Illinois. So I'm interested to hear how that works for you guys too.
Yeah. The difference is just the way I guess the industry is as a whole, kind of Cliff Notes version. It's very union heavy state, a lot of politics. Pretty much pretty much everything is dictated by state law within the fire service here, from hiring, promotions, everything, and then union contracts. So there's a lot of us versus them. Every municipality is different, whether there's good relationships or poor relationships with, village officials. So there's that aspect of it. Yeah, obviously staffing's an issue. One of the things I see is it's this struggle. We're like at this time, I feel that there's a few people that are like maybe trying to be progressive, but for lack of better words, it's like we're stuck in some old ways that, hey, we got to get out of. The constant blame on young people for not wanting to do the job. And it's like, hold on a second. What are we not doing to attract them into our organization? And then when we look into training, how are we training them? Because the ways of old, are they even relevant? Just because you went through it doesn't mean somebody else needs to. So are we adapting our training to meet the risk that we're facing today? It is the other question. And that's, sometimes we have this just complete disconnect, and it's like old versus new, and then there's just collision and nobody wants to have a conversation. And it's just kind of this us versus them, old versus new, and it's always blame this, blame that. And it's just, again, this is general. I'm not saying every organization, but just generally speaking, of the things that I've seen and experienced. And it's like, all it takes is simple conversations and an open mind. And we have to let go of what it was, and we have to look at what it's becoming and what it is, right? And then if we start having those conversations, we can start enacting some better change and attracting people and keeping people and developing better training practices.
I like the discussion you had with the us versus them. I think we have a me versus we problem right now.
Yeah.
And that's culturally as a fire service, right? And I think there's and this is not one department or another. I think it's all across. And so I don't know if that's a cultural thing that we have to adapt to, but it used to be a lot of, hey, how can I help each other? And I think the pandemic really hurt our culture, and not just in the fire service, but as a total society. And so changes, we had 4 years almost of, or at least 3 good years of basically isolation for a lot of folks. Now, fire service was a little bit separate from that, but there was a lot of shutdown in training, a lot of shutdown in progressive moves, and we got into a rut, I think. And we've seen that impact in the city of Virginia Beach for sure. And I think that we had a whole generation. We just had this past spring in service where it was the first time some of these people had ever had live burns outside of their recruit training. And we used to do that all the time. Right. And it was great. I think we got some pretty good reviews on it. We had really good folks out there. I mean, just excited to be on the fire ground, excited to be doing, what they trained to do. And we got some good feedback about how we can hopefully make it better for them in the future. And we'll do that now annually. But, the pandemic pushed that off for almost 4 years.
Yeah.
So when you're sitting at the fire station and you don't have those things to do, you're focused on me, you're not focused on we, and taking care of each other, and service delivery and the service model and that servant leadership that, I know you guys talk about and I 100% believe in. And so I don't know how you shift that, but that's something I would like to see us get back to the we versus the me. And that's well beyond our departments that we work with. But I think it's going to take hard leadership, hard decisions, and accountability, and some good pushes, and some, getting people to work together to make that happen. And it'll take time. And that's another thing that I'm an impatient guy. So it's hard. It's hard for me to do that. But at the same time, I like to see the progression. And so exciting things like making those changes and improving things is to me what kind of gets me going. And so I 100% agree. That's not isolated. Please don't think that's isolated to Illinois.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure, James City County, I'm sure it feels the same as Virginia Beach or Norfolk or, Ohio or wherever,
Yeah. I get a lot of that. I hear they did this or they. I'm like, who is they? Like who
is they?
They,
duh.
Sorry, guys. If my reception cuts out here, we are under a tornado warning.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Watch me.
It's Virginia. You don't get tornadoes.
That's Debbie.
Yes. Yes. Debbie Downer, the hurricane.
She's Debbie Downer. She's coming through there. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So what are you guys doing in Virginia Beach for leadership training? Anything new, anything kind of breaking the mold or doing anything different, or what you got going on?
Sure. So we're looking at some officer development and how we do officer development. And I'm certainly not alone in this. I've got most of our senior staff is sitting on this group now. And Chief Cooper was kind of the kickoff for that. And we had our former battalion chief who now works as our business. I think he's our business analysis specialist, but John MacGyver, he kind of is helping lead a group for talking about officer development. So we actually have officers, senior officers in the room and saying, hey, what's the best way to practice? And we've gone different routes to how to look at this, but we're looking at some options about how we deliver an annual in-service, which we've kind of always done at least 1 or 2 in-services a year for our company officers and above. So all of our officers, about 120-ish, probably, or maybe a little bit more with our chief officers. And we usually bring a speaker in, right? So once a year, we'll bring in a speaker. We've had some really good ones. Jason Redman, we brought in LUF, Leadership Under Fire, and had them last time. And we're going to bring in somebody this time that's going to be pretty cool, who's well known in the fire service, holds a podcast, and it should be pretty exciting here too, Corley Moore. So he's coming very soon in September for our officer in service. So we're trying to do that. And with that is a chief's chat. So our chief has an opportunity to address the entire officer corps, answer some questions, those kind of things. And we're going to have a little bit of an administrative piece of that. So we'll kind of go through that for that. And that's an annual thing that we kind of bring in and try to find somebody that specifically has to do with leadership or really hot topics that we believe are going to impact and help our officers. And then we sometimes record that so that everybody else can see it as well, so that there's a good impact across the, with 600 members to be able to push it out that way. Other things we're doing, obviously, is we're looking at how we're delivering that. So perhaps looking at, we sending folks to Virginia Fire Rescue Conference, sending folks to FDIC. Those are things we continually do in terms of those officer in service or the officer development. But we're also doing some internal stuff now where we want to develop and talk about leadership at all levels, because as you guys kind of indicated, we're young, and we're young in terms of our backgrounds, and we have a lot of new officers. I assume it's probably the same for you guys, and that making those decisions and having to deal with the non-fire ground stuff, right? Those HR issues or the in-station stuff is a lot harder than perhaps, a 2-story residential structure with fire showing on number 2 floor, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we train for. That's the exciting part, but then dealing with those other things. So a portion of our year will now be built around that, and just talking and having discussions and case studies and being presented to that, just to have those conversations and work through there. And then the rest portion of our year is something that we've been familiar with, and I know you're familiar with in James City, is our Command Sims program, which has really been something very beneficial for us. It has been a very long road, but it's something I think that our department has gotten a lot better at in terms of how we run command on the fire ground, and from the unit perspective, meaning that first company officer, to our chief level officers being able to go there and assume command and run, either small fires, marine incidents, extrications, large high-rise fires, and have those things in there. So inside of all of that, from a leadership perspective, that's specifically for our officers, but we certainly have a career path development program. And then you obviously have to have your minimum quals and certifications to get to the point of your officers to get for promotion and going through that entire process. But we want to continue education on that. So I think that we're trying to mix both a little bit of ops and a little bit of admin and a little bit of HR and a little bit of history, right? And a little bit of some case studies to make our folks better, because we don't have those reps and sets that we've had in the future or in the past for our future folks.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up trying to get to the younger folks. I'm a firm believer, and Kyle and I have talked about this before, of it's so hard when you've got a guy or a girl that's struggling leadership wise in the four walls of the firehouse, and then you want to change them. You want to get them to develop, and they go take some classes and they come back and try some new thing out, and everybody goes, yeah, that's not you. So I think it's so important, and I'm trying to figure out a way for us is how to get to our even before you're promoted, develop your style and get to know yourself and do some self-reflection and really get solid in your values and what you stand for and what your mission is, and get really solid in all your skills first, so that you don't have to do that hard road after you've been promoted and people want to reel you back into a different personality that you were before. So it's tough, but I talked to some guys when I was at FDIC from Calgary Fire Department, and they're basically doing leadership training right out the gate with their recruits. It doesn't say leadership training, but it really is leadership development. It's the personal development of setting their values and their missions early on, and growing that little bits at a time throughout their career, instead of all of a sudden going, congratulations, here's your captain's shield. Good luck. I hope you know how to run a crew. Like, I know you know how to run a fire, but good luck. And like you said, the 2-story fire is, we prep them for that all day long, but have we set them up for success in the firehouse?
Yeah, and I think you guys are doing some of this too, and I assume out there in Illinois you're doing the same thing, Kyle. Is we're trying to use technology with our learning management system, and also with pushing some stuff out to the field as far as ensuring our folks are all on the same page, and then developing task books, right? So that's a piece to that. I don't think that's leadership necessarily, but it's that preparatory process that helps them get to that point. I totally agree that, and I think that setting themselves up, and some other departments will go out there, and as you become a lieutenant or a captain, they actually either will rotate you around to different stations first, and you're a floating officer first to kind of get the flavor of the area, and it's different, right? When you take that shield, it's different, and I think that we're still dealing with, in the fire service specifically, but I'll pick on Virginia Beach as well, the buddy to boss kind of thing, right? And it's a tough change. It's a tough change going, all right, well, oh no, I've got to be with this person for 24 hours, but they're not doing what they're supposed to be, and I've got to hold them accountable. And then when I do hold them accountable, now I got to sit there and look at them for 24 hours. So that's a tough, it's a tough thing for leadership, and it's unlike any other public agency, right? Even in public safety, because you got to eat with that person, you got to run calls with that person on a very on a close truck and do some difficult things. So I'm a big believer in expectations, and I think that if you set those expectations early and often, and you sit them down, and I write them down, and I've done it at every level that I've been at in some form or fashion. Mostly I've written them. I think I've only had one or two areas where I haven't had some sort of written expectations, and I deliver them that they're not my expectations. They're our expectations, and they're nothing that I haven't taken from somebody else, put together, delivered, read from some sort of leadership book, worked together to make it happen, and it made it realistic to implement that to them. And then, hey, tell me what you think about this, and do you agree to these kind of things, or am I missing the mark, right? And I've had a couple of people who come back and said, hey, I have questions about this, and this. I'm like, first of all, I love the fact that you're looking at it and you're reading it and you're saying, hey, you're asking the questions. But some of that's I've learned from, and said, okay, well, yeah, I think we should implement it, or let me explain why I think this is important. And what I've found is, particularly at the company officer level, but at every level, if somebody does mess up, they're going to hit themselves first, or that crew, especially if you build good crew integrity, will address the issue before you can even get to it, barring it be a major issue, that kind of stuff. But, and they start, ownership into that. And then their expectations, you just keep rising that level. Right. And you have those A players out there to make it happen. So I think expectations are huge. And I think they're a big piece of leadership. And I think it helps, dissolve problems before they happen in a lot of places, right? At least or even absolve them completely, because they know that, hey, this is we know the ground rules of every HR or fire department's SOPs and those kind of things, but here's our company or our bureau or our division or our, areas branch or whatever. This is our expectations, and we're all kind of buying on this, and we're gonna lead by this credo, and try to make it our expectations together.
Yeah, I like that. I like the word expectations, and I think, the way I kind of think about it, and as we move forward as an industry, is especially getting to our younger and newer firefighters, like being able to establish that early on in their career. So when they get to promotion, everybody already knows their expectations. Like, it doesn't need to be a thing. It doesn't need to be a huge change. It is what it is, but we've developed these people from day one to follow our mission, to have a voice, and how to appropriately do that, because we, develop their identity, who they are, what their strengths are. And the day they get promoted, it is just like, okay, yeah, everybody knew that was coming. We know what they expect. It's easy. It's just kind of interesting the time we find ourselves in, I think. It's almost like, I don't want to compare it to the technological boom, but it's almost like the fire service, and probably every industry out there, right, just advanced so much so quickly, but our culture did not. It stayed back, and now we're trying to play catch up, and you just have this like cultural kind of division as we see in our society today. But I think it's in every profession out there as well, and it's kind of like battling that. But as we talk about, as you spoke about, expectations and getting to our young people and starting to establishing that, so by the time they get promoted, it's just this easy transition. Everybody knows, and we're already there, and we're starting to fix the issues.
Yeah, and I think culturally too, and I think we will start to see this, and I think I see this in some of our younger folks, is in school now, they are learning social emotional intelligence now. So they're going to come out into the workplace, for the most part, a little bit more emotionally intelligent than we were, and at least aware of it. So as leaders now, our old folks in the fire service, we got to step our game up. And if we're not, these folks see right through us really quickly. Like, hey, you're old school. You're leading like somebody from the Stone Ages. What's wrong with you? Why are you treating me like crap? I'm a human and I'm an adult. Like, hey, treat me with respect. I understand that I'm, recruits and rookies, the place that has, but we're all adults, and we're all adult learners and adults in the workplace. And if we treat people the way we historically did in the fire service when they came in, that's not going to work for our new folks.
Yeah, and I think that you guys have both hit on this. I think as far as we have to adapt, right? We're asking them to adapt, but I think that we have to adapt, and think about technology as a great example of that, right? I mean, is the best way to communicate with people these days by an email? No, they're probably gonna listen to this podcast before they read the email. You know what I mean? It's so, we're looking at, we've built an app in the Virginia Beach Fire Department to see if we can get information out to it. Hopefully it'll be coming out pretty soon, but that we're trying different stuff, right? We want to bring in folks. We want to do different things. Obviously, using technology with some of the stuff that we have going on, sending out different ways of doing that. We're using Survey 123 with a lot of things that we're doing to do reporting. So we're trying different methodologies to reach our folks and to transmit that information, to keep up with them. If we could have our own social media page, that could be a closed group, I think that'd be a great way to communicate with them. But there's so many legal parameters around that from a city perspective, right? Which I understand.
Yeah.
But that, in terms of communication, I've got 3 teenagers, and they're not reading email. I mean, they will when they have to go to school, but they're Snapchatting or sending direct messages or whatever the case may be. That's how they're communicating with each other. And I mean, that's what we're going to go into, right? And so I think that we have to change our ideology and how we look at things to come in there. But I also think that we have to hold people accountable, right? And I think that's the change that maybe, Kyle, you've kind of been talking about too, is, again, goes back kind of to the change of society. And again, the pandemic hurting us, and people being a little bit, it's different, and social skills were different. And so I'm glad they're teaching them in school, and they're starting to do that, because I think we missed 3 years of that. And that was an impact to our society that we're feeling in the fire service. And that for 3 years, we had a whole group of firefighters that didn't have that, had a different perspective of how the fire department, should be operating versus how we think the fire department has, or our exposure at least, to how the fire department has operated. And so I think those are big impacts to culture. And so how do you return that? Well, that's not going to happen overnight, right? If I'm used to going to bed every night at 7 o'clock, and now you tell me I have to go to bed now at 10:30 or vice versa. That's a change that you have to change your habits to do that, and habits take a long time to change.
Absolutely.
I want to circle back. You brought up briefly the command sims, and
Never heard of it.
We talk mostly about the people skills stuff, but we also like to talk about how improving your self-confidence and working on all these people skills really improves your composure and really improves your confidence. So I think stuff like command sims for our command officers, it doesn't just affect and improve their abilities on the fire ground or on an emergency scene. I think to me, it builds your confidence as well. And that bleeds over to your performance in a fire station. Because I have seen company officers and chief level officers who are not solid in their emergency operations, and that it really carries over to how they handle their crew and how they deal with expectations with their crew and training with their crew, because they themselves are not confident. So I love command sims because it's a great way to dial in some of that confidence in emergency operations at the chief level and at the company officer level, because it's clear expectations. Yeah. A great way to practice. Everybody's on the same page. You know what you're supposed to be doing. So can you talk about how command sims, what it is, how it got started, and where it is now, because it's grown?
Oh yeah, so for sure. And I like that analogy. I didn't really think about it that way, but certainly as you were speaking, I'm thinking to myself, some of the challenges or some of the things that some of our, whether they're master firefighters, captains, battalion chiefs, whatever level, have probably had some impacts to that and how that's carried over. So that's a good perspective I hadn't really thought about. So that's a good way to kind of look at that. Command sims for us started probably, we may be more than 12 years into this, maybe a little bit 13 years into this in terms of when it was kind of first realized or started. Battalion Chief John Keys, when he was here, Virginia Beach, kind of started some stuff, put a work group together. We all went to different styles of classes on incident command, and a lot of us had some background in incident command. At the time, I think I was like a master firefighter, and my boss, who currently is Chief Mike Brashear, was a part of that group. And there were a bunch of people on that team, Chief Eric Wilkerson, and there's a bunch of people who were a part of that initial program. And that program, we went to stuff like Blue Card or other online classes or ICS courses to make sure that we were following whatever the latest information was, and said, okay, how do we develop this for our own agency stuff, and kind of brought that back. So we went through that process, and it was like, okay, we want to practice on the fire ground. So it was I think at the time we were using Fire Studios, and we would go in and have, a couple of TVs, whatever the case may be, and kind of go through this process. And then it was, how do we build this? And over time, it just got bigger and bigger and better, where we could utilize technology, where we could do it on iPads, or we could even push it out to the stations, or we could get it on the web. And then we started doing it as a part of an in-service. And so that was kind of a big deal, because we were bringing people in and either paying them overtime or, realignment or whatever the case may be. And they would come in for 3 to 4 hours and just practice fires, right? Or not just fires, but any emergency incidents. I shouldn't just say fires, because we've done a lot of different ones now. And through that, there was other developments that came through it. So the first iterations of that, I would say, would be our, how are we doing this? And we would try different methodologies of how we're running. How would you run a fire? How do you run a fire? So that consistency of how you're running those emergency operations and developing that. And that kind of brought into our command board. Now, we had a command board, and it was somewhat similar, and it was, I think Chief Perry Ale was one of our first folks that kind of developed something and wrote it down. And of course, that gets passed on, kind of like anything else in the fire service. You learn from somebody else and steal that information and put it together. And then that kind of became its own group too. Like, they had a command board group with a bunch of folks on that group from our department, and kind of worked on that to make that even better. And that was kind of like, I would say, pretty much phase one of what we had, or maybe that was phase three of all these phases, but really kind of the first big changes that we had as far as how we were tracking people, accountability, working together, using some of the same ideas and tactics and that kind of stuff. And that was an easy change, right? And I read an article, I think, for Virginia Fire Rescue's magazine, or Commonwealth Chiefs magazine, about change isn't easy, right? And what do firefighters love? I don't know, but I was hoping you would tell me that they don't like change. They don't like the way things are, right? So right. That's always the common thing. But and I'm one of those guys too, right? So it's the same thing, but it's not. Change isn't easy. So trying to get somebody to communicate the same way, or to change the way they track their people, or to dial that thing in it can be nerve wracking. And now you have your bosses or your peers or your subordinates looking at you. And so that can be a different environment. But what we wanted to do is encourage them in a training environment, right? And that, hey, make mistakes here, try something new, try something that we don't know about. And that's going to make all of us better, right? And so that has been a long time coming with a lot of hard work from our fire department and our officers. And I'm really proud to say that they've done a really good job with that. And we've been able to share that information there. So the next iteration of that was kind of where you started, which I think I wish we had done that if we'd go back in time with your fire department, Kerry, is, common language, right? And so we should be using the same terms, the same information. And we started with NFPA terms. And so that was a whole discussion of how we do that. And, there was discussions and arguments and why do we have to do it this way and that kind of stuff. And then we basically put together a training program that said, hey, common language. And then, hey, what are we all doing? Well, we know that the first engine's doing this, the second engine's doing this. And I would argue right now that, Kyle, if I told you the second engine in your area probably does water supply, right? The first engine probably obviously does fire attack, right? So there's probably some similarities to what we're doing. And so getting us all on the same page and then codifying that in language. Oh no, now you're writing it down, right? And so that was another phase of the program. And so I think you guys call them tactical guidelines. We call them first alarm assignments, but their nickname is playbooks, right? And so we stole that from sports. So like if you go out into the field and you know that you're playing football, it's going to be a running play or a passing play. And so it's the same kind of thing here, is that if we know it's going to be a 2-story or a multifamily or a commercial or a high rise, we have a playbook for that to initially start those kind of things. So that was kind of that next phase of that, and then introducing the common language, and now getting all of our officers on board to communicate the same, assume command the same, and use that, but not make robots, right? That's the last thing you want to do, is you're giving them a schematic, right? But at the same time, recognize and use, Chief Mike Baraki says this all the time, critical decision-making. And look at, hey, if I've got fire showing here, or this is a defensive fire, or I've got a rescue, imminent rescue on side Charlie, go fix that. We're here for number one for rescue, right? Life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. Well, and I would argue that, a lot of time life safety obviously should be exactly what we should do. And our incident stabilization is written in our playbooks. We can tell you how we're going to do that. And then obviously the property conservation piece is that third piece to it, to ensure that we're saving exposures and sort of the rest of any property that we have going on there, or cars, or whatever the case may be. So as we work through that process, that's kind of where we've gone, and then it's kind of grown now. And so obviously we've shared that with some of our other jurisdictions that are locally here, and I think that's hopefully going to continue to expand, at least in how we're communicating, so that our auto aid and our surrounding jurisdictions will do that. There are plenty of other jurisdictions that have really good auto aids. You're in one of them, Kerry, which is fantastic. Northern Virginia, Kansas City Metro. You look at a lot of places in Florida, California, they have common rules, common language, common response protocols. And I think that probably is down the road. I don't know how far down the road. I hope sooner than later, but will be something that we'll be able to implement here in the Hampton Roads area.
Yeah,
so that's kind of a short
snap there. We've been down there multiple times to participate in command sims and learn from you guys. And it's really cool to see how as it's traveled through our area, because like you said, we do a ton of auto aid, and we want the folks coming into our jurisdiction to have the same expectations. We don't want to say, we've set all these expectations for James City County, but the second in engine's a York County engine. Like you probably need to know the expectations too. And even better if they're all the same across James City, York, and Williamsburg. And so it's been really cool as we work towards that to make it helps with radio discipline. There's not as much radio traffic. B, it makes, I think, our young company officers that don't have a ton of experience, it makes them feel more secure in that, hey, it's written right here. And
sure.
And like you said, the first line in our technical guideline, maybe not the first line, but in the very beginning of it, it says, nothing in this shall take the place of a critical thinking company officer.
Exactly.
Because we want you to be able to make critical decisions and call an audible if you need to.
Absolutely. And yeah, audible is the best word I can use. And I use it all the time with those kind of things. And to be fair, we're not 100%, right? We still have some folks that haven't totally bought in or are still working through those change processes. And, I think we're open to looking at if the playbooks or the tactical guidelines aren't where they need to be, then okay, let's look at some stuff. And I know that one example right now for us is our county operations. there's some discussion about how we should be doing certain stuff. And I said, for now, we should be obviously following what our current order of arrival assignments and those kind of things should be. But if there's a way to make it better, that's what it's all about. And to make us more efficient, more effective, and then have better communication. Because what are the common things that we see when we see some sort of tragedy on the fire ground, or some sort of mishap, or just a bad fire?
Always
right?
Communication.
Communication is always number one. And the next thing you're going to see from some sort of lettered agency, right? Or OSHA, which we could talk about, all those standards are going to change. That's a whole other conversation, or maybe even a podcast for you guys. But what's the next thing is incident command, right? And so if we can get ahead of some of that in terms of our communication, and we get ahead of that in some of how we're doing those kind of things, it removes that assumption. And so, and Kerry, I've talked about this a lot, about order of arrival, and that has been something that's been a little harder for us to get into, but now we're starting to do it. And even our surrounding local jurisdictions here, I think we're starting to hear them take on that same vibe as well, because they're doing very similar things. It's not so far strangely different to how guess what? The priorities still have to be the same at these kind of calls, right? The priorities are always going to be the same there. It's just how we're doing it. And if you arrive as the second or third due engine, but you don't announce that, then how do I know where you are, right? And so my assumption is, oh man, I got to go in there and do this. I need to get the water supply because I didn't hear engine, X arrive on the scene. So working through that, at first we definitely had some pushback and was like, well, why are we doing this, right? And to be fair, we, our department didn't necessarily release it in the best way, but we learned from that. And so, we worked through that, and I think that I definitely got some heat on that, but that's okay. And I think we're better for it. And so now we're working towards making and that's what it's all about. And if we can make it better from there, and we have plenty of talented people in our fire department that if they want to make those things better, I'm always like, hey, how can we do that? And push that up through our senior staff and get them to ultimately approve whatever those changes are. And heck yeah, let's do those kind of things. But it's change. And so sometimes that's very hard for us to adapt to.
Yeah, 100%. The Darley essay contest this year, the topic is how to get people to overcome institutional change, the resistance to institutional change. I'm like, does anyone have the answer to that? So I'm a judge. I've been reading, there's like 80 or 60 some entries. I've been reading papers. I'm like, where's the answer? Somebody in here has to have the answer.
Well, it's almost like you got to draw that line in the sand and understand, like, again, it's like almost that generational thing. And it's like, we need to attack these new people coming into our industry with like this progressive, like where we're at now and where we're going, and understand that there's people that have been in the industry that are not going to like it, and it's like, we got to fight that fight in the interim until we get everybody in that's like accustomed to the way we're operating here in 2024 versus 1980,
Well, and I got a question. I don't have this answer either, but I'm also curious to see how we're looking at the job, and I'd be curious to see how you look at it, because I look at it and I always came in as a career. And even though obviously I moved around fire departments, which was unheard of. That's not unheard of anymore. Right. That's a more common theme than ever. And, when I left Virginia Beach Fire Department in 2007, they're like, what are you doing? And so that was a change. And then, I came running back, but at the same time, I think that we're looking at it differently. And I think perhaps, and I can't speak to this because I'm not this generation, is they're looking at it as a job, and they're looking at it as, hey, I'm going to come in here. And some of them will do a really good job. They'll do the best job that they can, but then they're going to go home. And that's different from, if you look at overtime or Mandos or those kind of things. And we discussed a little bit earlier, the me versus we. They're looking at, hey, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to give you my time for 24 hours and I'm going to head home. That's my plan, because I've got a family, or I've got, a second job, or I don't. Like, I want to be paid, compensated well. I want to do a really good job while I'm there, and I want to go home and turn that off. And I think that culturalistically, that's not what we're used to, right? We're used to being, hey, I'm going to take care of those kind of things. And I don't know if either one of them is wrong. I just think it's different. And those are the kind of things that we have to perhaps adjust to. And they're trying to take that time that they have and use that, we always say balance of life, right? But I don't know if that's the real thing. I think that, I put a lot of time in the fire department, and then I eject and go to the Outer Banks and send pictures to Kerry and say, hey, this you're not here, right? You're not here. And then she does the same thing. Hey, well, you're not here when I'm out here, right? So I'm a work hard, play hard kind of person. But I think some of these guys may have figured it out. Maybe some of these guys and gals have figured it out and said, hey, I'm going to work for my 24 hours. I may work 1 or 2 overtime shifts a month, and I'm going to go enjoy time, play golf or hang out with my kids, or, do these kind of things. And I'm, like, well, maybe they figured it out, and we're able to do those kind of things because we're doing a little bit better in some of the things that are happening. But I don't know. I'm curious your take on that too. So, I think that maybe that's that cultural changes that we're not used to either.
Yeah, and I don't know how much time we have left, but I have my thoughts are this new generation Gen Z that's coming in is figuring it out. Like you said, their priorities are where they should be. Their family time off. It makes you a better employee when you come back to work because you're not, like we were. Anyways, but I do think Gen Z has not everybody, because I don't want to put everybody in a box, has a need and a want to make a difference. And what better job, especially in a community that you live in. So, but what we have to explain to them and show them the why, that the department you're working for is not just churning out lemmings. You're not just a number, that we want you to make a difference every single day that you're at work, and then go home and please enjoy your time off, and please use your leave, and please make your family the first priority, and don't give everything to this department like we did. But I think it's up to us to really show them that they can make the difference in this job. And then it's not just a job. Then it is, I think it's both. I do think it's both.
Yeah, I kind of, to be honest with you, may cause some controversy with our listeners, but I feel like I've played both ends, right? I came to my career, I was gung ho and, military veteran, and kind of went and nose to the grindstone, hardcore, all this stuff. And then life happened, and I'm kind of on that flip side now. And I'm like, yeah, I really don't look at it like a calling, and it is a job, and it's a great job. I'm very thankful for this job, but I'm going to go do my job, and then I'm going to come home. I'm not going to answer emails. Don't text me. Like, I don't want any part of it, Now, environmentally, there could be some reasons for that as well, but it's just priorities definitely shift. But, and then you just look at the industry, right? It's like, hey, come be a firefighter, where your chance of suicide is high. Your chance of cancer is high. You're dying young is high. And all these young people are like, well, if I'm going to do this, then I'm going to work my shift, and then I'm going to go enjoy my life, and I'm going to travel. And I'm going to, we got a lot of guys who, I'm one of them. I'll take a month off. We got young guys that take a month off. They go travel. They go do this stuff. When I started, nobody skipped overtime. Now, most junior guys are skipping overtime. I mean, I am too. But it's like, just so much has changed. And, I think COVID's a part of it as well. Post-COVID, I mean, we're running a lot more EMS calls now, so you're just seeing more and more. And, mental health is a big thing, and they're talking about it, and you don't want to get burned out. You need this time away. So it's like, how do you balance all this stuff? And, for me, I think everybody's calling, as any person in any walk of life, like, your truest calling is who you really are at your core. So like, for me and our young people, it's like, who are you? And whatever that calling is, sure, bring it into the fire service. Like, I want your strength in this industry, but it's also that thing that you're bringing into every aspect of your life. So like, what is that? And like, drive that home, because that'll make them more encouraged in every aspect of the life. And that's truly what the calling is. I think a long time ago, it's just this identity that a lot of people just 100%. Fell into, right? I'm a fireman. This is who I am. And I'm like, no, I work as one, but that's not who I am, and I think that mentality and that quote, it causes controversy with a lot of, older generation in our industry. And it's who eat, breathe, and even some younger people coming in, that do 30, 35, 40 years. And I'm like, I'm trying for an early retirement here in 4 years and go do a second career, And I think you're going to start seeing more of that as well. People are going to come, they're going to do their time, and they're going to go off into a second career. And I think that's something the industry needs to start preparing for. I don't think you're going to see a lot of 30, 40-year-old careers anymore as well. It just has changed a lot. And, I mean, we could talk all day about this, but the responsibilities of the job and everything that we do and everything that's asked of us, and year over year, again, the political environment here in Illinois, it's like, do more, and we're going to take people away from you. We're going to take people away from you. And it's just, a human being can only endure so much. And then they're like, wait a second, hold on.
I think this is the balance of that. And I said this a few years ago. We're no longer competing against James City County or Norfolk or Chesapeake or some of our local fire departments around here. I'm competing against the $60,000-$70,000 job where you can, not have any pants on and sit at your desk all day, right?
Yeah.
And do a job versus, hey, I'm going to pay you, less than that, and you're going to come work for a fire department. We're going to put you through a rigorous academy, and then once you get out of the academy, you're going to be on probation for 12 months, and then you're going to have now. scheduling might be a little bit better based on where you are and those kind of things, but you got to get through these tests and first, or you can log online and we'll pay you pretty much close number to that. And they're not looking at career. They're looking at, okay, well, I'll do that for a few years and then I'll go do something else. Right. And so, whereas we were kind of brought into, hey, come in here, you're going to get these, you're going to get benefits, you're going to do all this kind of stuff. And there is huge impacts that, I mean, I'm getting, it's weird. I sat in a class the other day in Chesapeake, and it was a great class. And I've actually, I think I've taken definitely portions of it before, but it was on ICS for high rises. And it was the first time I've sat in a class and like, I think I have some of the more experience in this class, right? Because you always you don't want to be the person in the room with the most experience, or, you know, kind of want to learn. And I was looking around, I'm like, okay, well, I feel like there's a lot of young folks in here in terms of experience. And I was like, well, that's the fire service now. Like, and that was my kind of little realization. I was like, man, I'm getting old. This is not what I'm used to. I think I'm 22 years old, right? And 10 years of experience max, right?
Right.
2 years experience, right? And sitting in the room, you know, so it's changed, and that's the difference in the fire service. But I feel like I learned a ton in that class, even though the material probably wasn't, you know, mind blowing, right? It's an NFA class. Most of those classes aren't necessarily mind blowing. It's good information, but the conversations, the information, and some of the feedback from the students in that class were great because of those kind of things, and their perspective is different, right? And so it's the same thing for our fire departments and our new folks that are coming in there. But if you hire 120 folks in the last 2 years, right, that's a lot of new people in there, and that's a lot of people to influence, whether, you know, dinosaurs lay dinosaur eggs. So hopefully our dinosaurs are laying really good eggs that they can take and push the culture. And part of that, I love what you said there. We have to also adapt. And like we talked about earlier, it's okay for you to come in here and say, okay, it's a job. Is if you're giving that 110%, I think that battalion chiefs probably and above, and even some captains, obviously checking emails on off days is kind of an expected thing, or some of those things. Because right. But as a firefighter at the station, even probably as a company officer station, that's probably not something you have to do every day. But yeah, I think most people who are engaged in the job are probably going to, and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like, use some time off. I've got our training captain right now, Captain Beaumont's in often he's in the northern part of, I think he's in Maine right now, and go enjoy your time. Right. Like he called me today. He was curious about, because I had a meeting with the fire chief today, and I was like, it went well. He's on board with a lot of stuff that we're doing. It's good. He gave some direction. It's okay. Here's what's happening. Go enjoy your time off. He's like, okay. And it's the first time I talked to him all week. And our joke is call you in 45, because he's our incumbent captain. So I talk to him a lot. and so, but you also have to relax and use that time. And I'm the worst one about that, right? Because I want to stay engaged. I want to do the right thing for the organization. But there's aspects to that. There's mental health stuff that obviously, you know, we were brought up in a different era, or I was brought up in a different era, but there are impacts to that, and we need to think about those things, and we need to learn from some of our younger generations. And I do think some of them haven't figured out better than I do, and so I like listening to that and see how we do that. I don't think I'm going to change some of the way I do that. I like the work hard, play hard aspect. That's what I'm used to, right? Change is hard, but I think that it's worth listening and seeing how we can get and invoke the excitement from our folks that do think that way, or we're brought up that way.
Yes. See, I love our discussions always go in some direction. Bob and Beeve. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap this episode up here, but we greatly appreciate your time, Chief Carter, and for coming on and being our first guest of the new season. And
yes, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. Good discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right, listeners, this is Monday that you are hearing this, and we will chat next Monday as well. If you have any comments, obviously drop them in the comment box or hit us up on social media or email. And until next time, it's the Heat of the Command podcast.
As we wrap up another episode, this has been Kyle
and Kerry
from the Heat of Command podcast.
Thank you, as always, for listening. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And as always, we love the feedback. Keep it coming.
See you next time.